welcome to AJAC's first, and we do intend, annual Executive Forum. And our subject is The Future is Now. This is a panel discussion. It's on the current and future landscape of the Canadian automotive industry. And it will be followed by a Q&A. And here on the stage we have surely 5 of the brightest executive minds in the Canadian automobile industry. You also have me. I'll be the moderator of this discussion, and I will ask you to hold your applause until the end. But first, I'd like to introduce the 5 members of the panel sitting next to me, and I shall ask them to introduce themselves with their names and titles. This is partly to do a microphone check and everything, but to make sure we get it right. Sir.
Now, I'll start off. I'm David Patterson. I'm Vice President of Corporate Affairs for General Motors Canada, so I do our public policy and communications.
Wolfgang Hoffmann, President Jaguar Land Rover, and that's the best English accent impression I can make.
François Lefebvre, I'm not French at all. Nissan Canada, I'm Chief Marketing Manager for the Leaf.
All right. Don Romano, President, CEO of Hyundai Canada.
Wrong. No, just kidding. Ted Lancaster, and I'm Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Kia Canada.
Great. So, this panel will last about an hour. We'll have 3 basic but different topics for discussion. Each will take about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to throw the room open for questions from the floor. Each panel member will also be available afterwards for potential scrumming or one-on-one interviews or whatever you want to do with them. They have said they don't have to rush out, but they do need to leave at some point. Our topics center around electrification, connectivity, and ride-sharing. And I'll ask an open question. Each panel member will have a minute to respond to it, and then we'll all just go at it. So let's start with electrification. And the question is, some car makers are investing heavily in electric cars and believe them to be the future of transportation. Other makers say electricity is just a short-term solution, limited in the supply of raw resources and the capacity of the grid, and it's impractical for the majority of drivers. Where do you stand on this, and why? And we'll start with David, immediately to my side.
Well, at General Motors, no surprise, I think we're all in for the future of electrification. We think it's going to be a very critical aspect. We're very proud to have been very successful here in Canada with the Chevrolet Volt, and we're excited about coming out with the Chevrolet Bolt with 383 kilometers of range. And so we think that the technology still has a lot of work to do. Battery technology in particular, but it's definitely going to be a part of the mix, not just because of government regulation, but I think a lot of our customers are going to be excited about the technology going forward. That said, there's a lot of work to do in a whole variety of areas to build that whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said, that it will be part of the mix. At Jaguar Land Rover, obviously, we're investing a lot of our resources into the electrification as well. Mainly now seen as the first step with participating in the Formula E. We believe the future will be electrification, and you will drive electrically, and the best way to prove that is also, of course, on the racetrack. Still a lot of work to be done. I just remember 20 years ago, before I started in the automotive industry, I asked a good friend of mine, so what's the next big step and what's happening in the automotive industry tomorrow, so to speak? And he said, fuel cells. In 3-4 years, we will all drive fuel cells. That's all I can say at the moment.
He was right.
He was ahead of his time.
Stole my point on Formula E, so that I think Formula E also clearly indicates that we're going into that direction. And us at Nissan, on July 2011, we've launched the very first mass-produced Leaf here in Canada. I was there for the delivery of the vehicle in Ottawa, and everybody was skeptical. Everybody was asking a lot of questions. Now we see how many cars do we have that are plug-in hybrid or fully electric. It's amazing the number, how the number has grown. We're up to, I think, 28 vehicles that are either 100% electric or plug-in hybrids. So it's a constant development in terms of products. So we're not going backwards, actually going forward.
All right. Yeah, electric cars are becoming very popular. I think Tesla has helped elevate the concept, and sure, we're going to follow suit. We're coming out with a brand, Ioniq. It'll be out in January. We'll have an electric car. But let's face it, there are limitations. The battery technology is not there right now. If your car goes, 383 kilometers and you need to go 390, there's a problem, right? And the problem is, if we want to drive right now to Montreal in an electric car, we're going to have a challenge. That doesn't mean for commuters it doesn't make a lot of sense. For a certain portion of the population, electric cars make sense. We're going to build electric cars for that portion of the population. But long term, are we all going to be driving electric cars? Not until the battery technology changes dramatically. And in the meantime, we have fuel cell technology. Fuel cell technology, you can fill up the car in 5 minutes. You can drive 400 to 500 kilometers. You can store the energy, which you cannot do on the grid with electric energy. And our province right here produces more electricity than we can use. But what do? We either dump it or sell it cheap down to the States. And that's a shame, because we could be converting that to hydrogen, and we could be building a hydrogen infrastructure. And for those of you that don't know, a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is an electric vehicle. It just happens to run on hydrogen. You don't have to plug it in, and you don't have to wait. So I think there's going to be a multitude of solutions coming down the road. And I do think battery technology will continue to improve. But in the meantime, I think we have to look at a multitude of different options to improve the environment and to move this forward. And I can't think of a better place to start than Ontario, where we have excess electricity going to waste.
So being the last guy, it's easy for me to say pretty much what they said. But I think electrification is something that's not going to go away. We've just seen Bill 104 pass in Quebec. They have a surplus of electricity, so we know why that bill passed. And the one thing I will say is, it's not just about electrification, it's about infrastructure as well. Challenging conditions of movement. We talked about the range of these vehicles. Range is only a limit if you don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to drive the distance that you need. Now, we're very fortunate. We just happen to have a Soul EV driver make his way from Quebec all the way to Tofino. And 7,000 kilometers, and he did it in his Soul EV, which was fantastic. But that's a difficult trek right now. As we continue to grow electrification, as that becomes a construct of the future, this is something that I think we'll see more of. There'll be more charging stations. And not just charging, there'll be hydrogen charging stations along with it. And the governments are working very hard right now to look at how can they make the infrastructure work for a multitude of environmentally friendly vehicles, because in the end, that's really what we as OEMs should put on the forefront of our business plans, which is finding a way to make our vehicles as eco-friendly as possible and make sure we protect the environment and give consumers what they ultimately want. And they are the ones that will really drive whether electrification goes in the right direction, or fuel cell goes in the right direction, or we stick with the combustible engine.
So, Don, you mentioned Bill 104 in Quebec, which, if I recall correctly, it forces automakers to supply or to sell 3.5% of their vehicles in Quebec must be ZEVs, zero-emission vehicles.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mentioned 104.
Right. Is that a realistic thing?
And
is it realistic across Canada, not just Quebec?
Well, the thing with Bill 104 at this point in time, it's 3.5%, but what they haven't said is which vehicles qualify and what credits we're going to get for those vehicles. So it's going to depend. I mean, at Kia, our goal right now is to be 25% better with our fuel efficiency by the year 2020. So we're bringing in plug-in hybrids, we have hybrid vehicles, and we have the Soul EV. And I think a lot of the other OEMs have similar technologies and similar products. So the 3.5% is derived from the number of credits for each vehicle that you sell. So I think it is attainable so long as they get the credits right. So it is going to depend on the credits, and it's going to depend on which vehicles they include in the credits.
Yeah, so Quebec is the first Canadian province to pass a ZEV mandate law. Ontario has a different approach, which is to really bring together the groups that are also developing our infrastructure at the same time, and realizing that this is going to be a learn as we go type of exercise. So I think we will see electrification, particularly in urban areas. It's going to be much stronger in Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver than it is in a rural area. And it'll be assisted by some of the other trends we'll talk more about in terms of families not just owning one or two vehicles, but using their smartphone to call up a vehicle. And that smartphone might call up an electric vehicle in certain instances and in cities, but be less practical when you're making that trip to Montreal. So we're going to have a lot more choices. In terms of what the targets that governments set, I think we're going to have to wait and see. California has been setting targets and then resetting targets for a decade. And so really there is no way around an adoption of technology but to kind of learn as you go. And I think the one key thing at the end of the day is we have to remember it's actually people that buy vehicles at the end of the day, not whether they're forced on the marketplace or set by regulation. If we can't convince consumers that they want to purchase or utilize these vehicles, it's not going to work. And ultimately, that's the fallacy of a lot of these types of forced legislation. They forget that there's a consumer involved in the equation.
Wolfgang, if I can ask you, I believe Jaguar Land Rover doesn't sell a lot of electric vehicles. Does this mean that you're jiggered in Quebec?
No, because the regulation adopts the California bill, so to speak, and there is a threshold with how many cars you sell in Quebec, and then you fall into the regulation or you're outside of the regulation. Our volume at the moment is below the threshold, so we are not affected at the moment. Now, however, everybody has growth plans, so that doesn't mean that it will not affect us or it won't affect us in the future. But that's a little bit then beyond the point, because obviously we are working on electrification as well. Unfortunately, not in a position to tell you when we will talk more in detail about it, but
Sure
it will be pretty soon. It's just, yeah. Yeah, there was wrong. Thank you. Yeah, there was a time before the internet. That was a beautiful time. My father always went on vacation. There was no phone and nothing, so he wasn't bothered and didn't know what's going on in the world. I think in general, and the colleague said it as well, it's sometimes strange for me to see how governments work and using the car and the car industry a little bit like as the scapegoats. Without mobility, we wouldn't be right here at that moment. No? Even here at Mosport, people wouldn't have moved from the east of the countries and the states to the west coast. Mobility is what brings diversity, brings wealth, brings people together and expands human race. And then to say, oh no, but now I'm picking on that little aspect of society that influences greenhouse gases, I feel sometimes it's not the right way to tackle it. And to tell a car manufacturer how to solve a problem, I don't believe that's also right. I think, if you tell us these are the limits with regards to CO2, then let us figure it out. Because at the end of the day, as David said, there's a consumer. The consumer needs to buy, he or she needs to buy the solution. And if we can't produce it in a cost-effective way, then we can't fulfill the thresholds. Then we are forced to, give cars away. That also doesn't make sense. No one would build a business on that. So I think the politics and politicians and the industry need to come more often together and talk about these things and figure a way out. But I also understand, of course, you need to put pressure on certain industries sometimes in order to achieve something. But it has to be reasonable and sensible. And Dave said it as well. What happens also is that governments set targets and then they have to retract from them because they were just technologically not achievable. And we don't want that either, no? Because you need to have a clear guideline and a target you can work to as a manufacturer. If the goalposts are changing all the time, I mean, you and I then wouldn't play soccer anymore if they change the rules every other day.
So thinking of things that are practical and achievable, and Francois, I'll put this question to you first for your comment. I think that everybody has agreed that electric cars are wonderful things when they're running around and we're all accelerating quickly with maximum torque and all of that stuff. But the charging is an issue, and the people that really need electric cars are the ones who live downtown, who probably don't have easy access to a plug-in point, and they're not allowed to have a plug-in in their condo, that sort of thing. Don has already suggested that fuel cell vehicles are the alternative to this, a different way of charging up an electric motor. How are you guys at Nissan dealing with the fact that your prime customers for Leafs don't have easy access usually to a plug-in point?
Well, first of all, yes, it's definitely a challenge because we see all these high rises in Toronto being built without charging station. But what we're looking at is also all the people that are living all around the core, like the Mississauga, AJAC would be. There's a huge amount of population in Brampton, for example. These multiple houses, thousands and thousands of houses that could easily have a charging station, and most of the people either live in Mississauga and work in Mississauga, or live in Mississauga, work downtown, and that's sort of the perfect scenario where if these people would be aware of the Ontario program where they pay half of the charging station, that would open the door. It's not for everyone. Not everyone can actually or could purchase an electric car, depending on their needs. But if you look at the average Canadian drive day, it's about 42 kilometers. So it's a vast majority they could actually consider it as one of their cars.
So you're suggesting an electric car like a Leaf is not a downtown car at all. It's a car for getting to downtown.
Could be downtown if we look at the programs that some provinces are pushing on, like BC, on having a charging station program for the workplace. So if we can't modify the residential condos or towers, well, workplace could also be a very interesting aspect where the government can pay for charging station for the workplace station. So that's a very good possibility and very good program that certain businesses in Quebec, for example, are offering to their employees. So that's another aspect of it.
Don has mentioned the fuel cell vehicle as being one of the ways to get into the future here. It certainly seems to make a lot of sense. We all agree it sounds great. Are you guys cooperating on this? All five of you?
Well, one of the things that some of you may have had an opportunity to drive a couple of years ago, we produced a fleet of about 150 Chevrolet Equinoxes that were fuel cell developed here in Canada, and we're part of a hydrogen fuel cell project that we did called Project Driveway. And we've recently made various announcements with the U.S. military in terms of developing hydrogen fuel cell vehicles with them as well, with some of our Chevrolet Colorados. So I think the point is absolutely correct that there's great advantages to hydrogen in that, if we all have, for example, natural gas coming into our homes, it is possible to conceive of a future where converters give you a source of hydrogen in your home or in your garage to be able to fuel a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And, the big drawback for a lot of people thinking about intercity commuting on electric vehicles is it's great that you got range now, and all that's good. But what happens when I pull into a roadside recharging station and there's 4 people ahead of me and they're each going to take 20 minutes? That's a lot of hamburgers I got to eat before I can get going again. So there are some real practical aspects. Of course, the recharging on hydrogen, much faster, it's safe, but also more development to be done on all these things. And so I like to say there's no silver bullets on the objective of trying to reduce greenhouse gas. There's silver buckshot, but you can't forget the consumer. If you cannot make this something that's attractive to a person who's actually going to purchase and operate the vehicle, then you're really fooling yourselves. And it takes time to make sure that connection works. And so I think we're getting there on electric. I think that there's a lot of infrastructure work to be done on hydrogen yet, but the technology is here and it works great. It's not that it's not available. It's not that we can't deliver it. There's work to do. Batteries need to increase, but if we can't do it together with infrastructure and if we can't make consumers really excited about this, then it is not going to work.
With respect, you didn't answer the question, which is, are you guys cooperating on this? Do you talk to Hyundai? Talk to them about how they...
Yes. So, for instance, we have a development project together with Honda.
Thank you.
Yeah, I work with this guy, and he works with me. And
Okay.
no, actually, we have a consortium, which includes Honda, Toyota, Kia, Hyundai. Am I missing anybody, Ted? Anyway, who?
Mercedes?
Mercedes, BMW. So yeah, and really the main goal, and one thing we all agree on, is the need for infrastructure. So, and one thing we all agree on is that consumer demand is going to drive the future, not legislation and not requirements from the government. As positive as their efforts are to get us going faster, the fact is it's what the consumer is going to buy and the infrastructure that we're going to provide that's going to help create that demand. The more elaborate the infrastructure, the easier the access, the faster the charging, the more the greater the increase in demand. And I think that's really what we're trying to do, is work with the government to understand, get them to understand that we have to work on the infrastructure. It's not about just putting rebates out there, and it's not about setting mandates, but it's about developing an infrastructure so that people have easy access to electricity or hydrogen or whatever technology is going to drive the future is going to be absolutely critical, and that the current service stations that are providing fuel today do more than just provide fuel, right? You get your bottled water, your Snickers bar, your car washed, your lotto tickets. It's part of our daily routine, and it's going to be incumbent on those distributors to also adapt to these new technologies and provide these new technologies and the electricity and the hydrogen at their convenient locations that are, again, part of our daily routine. So I think it's getting that understanding that this has to become part of our everyday routine before we're really going to see demand pick up and these cars really take off to the levels that, for instance, Quebec would like to see in another 5 years.
That's another discussion. I'm going to move on to the next subject. We can come back. We'll probably have questions about this. Electrification is something that concerns us as journalists. I'd like to discuss something that concerns more car buyers. I don't think that most car buyers are going out there really caring very much about electrification. It's still something in the future. A percentage of them are. But absolutely everybody wants to know about connectivity. Everybody who's buying a car, mostly because they can't be bothered to drive a car, and so they want to know how you're going to make it easier for them. So the question for the second discussion is, there is an overwhelming demand for vehicles to be better connected and to provide us as much assistance to the driver as possible. However, this also removes responsibility from the driver. How do you balance providing electronic assistance with the need for a driver to remain alert and attentive? And I think we'll start at the other end, if we may.
I think the biggest thing that at least from our organization and from what I hear from the other OEMs is safety. So connected car is going to offer and right now offers wonderful safety attributes within the vehicle that provide our consumers with warning systems that allow them to drive and eliminate some of the typical mistakes that we see of lane drift, not a quick response to braking. Those types of elements that we've seen have created accidents and caused larger accidents. I think the big debate that we always look at is where's the responsibility lie? And that's what the legislation is debating right now, is whose fault is it if you're in an autonomous vehicle and the vehicle gets into an accident, whose fault is it? The person that put it into autonomous mode? So is it the driver or is it the OEM because they're the ones that said that it shouldn't get into the accident? I think that's a debate that's going to rage on for a number of years. Now, we have got license to put an autonomous vehicle in Nevada at this point in time as an organization, and we're doing our testing. I still think it's quite far off in the future, but I think anything we can do to make the roads safer, it's incumbent upon us as OEMs to ensure we do that. And connectivity allows us to do that, but we just have to be cautious at what point in time do we literally let the driver take the responsibility away from them to operate, pretty major responsibility of driving a vehicle.
Don?
Yeah, I think that there's two issues. One is autonomous systems, and I believe that that's an evolution, not a revolution, as some would suggest. We're not going to see a bunch of cars driving themselves in the next 5 years on the roads. There's just too many obstacles to get there. However, in the process of getting there, we are going to see, as Ted mentioned, more and more safety systems and autonomous, semi-autonomous systems brought to market, helping us make the road safer, helping people drive safer. And it's going to just evolve. I think eventually, yeah, we are going to see cars driving around the roads without drivers, but it's going to take this evolutionary process before we get there. And I think all of us are working on those systems, and I think it's all for the betterment of our drivers. But a connected car, I guess I was thinking of something a little different, and that is, you're driving down the road and information's coming back to us, and we're saying, hey, your hydrogen consumption's a little low, or I had to throw that in, okay, but maybe your compression ratio's off, your viscosity's down, and with respect to that connectivity between the manufacturer and the driver and the car, we still have a number of privacy issues we're going to have to overcome, but ultimately, being able to provide better service and make the lives of our customers more convenient, I think, is at the basis of that. And I think we are going to see greater connectivity between us and our customers and our cars to make their lives better. But again, just like autonomous cars, there's going to be a number of obstacles we're going to have to overcome, we're going to have to think through, and we're just not there yet. It's not going to happen overnight.
Well, just like electric cars, I fully agree it's an evolution. At the end of the day, right now at Nissan Renault, we have our objectives: 2017 autonomous driving, single lane driving; 2018 changing of lane, and then full autonomous driving by 2020. And that's an objective globally. I can't say when that's going to arrive in Canada. Again, there's legislation, there's laws that will and testing that will have to happen. It's great that the Ontario government is open to that as well, which is that's amazing. So for testing, that's going to be key, but that's one part of it, and I think connectivity is even more important. We see a lot of it now, but there's still a lot we can do. So, for example, we partner up with Microsoft, and again, our two companies, and now three, and just to elevate the amount of connectivity in our cars, to have a cloud that's accessible to everyone for real-time communication, and we can say almost relationship between the car and information gathering and information transfer between the driver and what's happening outside and inside the car. So it makes it just smarter driving, and even less distraction as well when the car is literally talking to you. So, but again, these are things that will progress throughout the next few years, and it's really exciting times. We have electrifying and having different types of engines and combustion system. We have the intelligent mobility, but also the connectivity of our cars. So three things that are just growing, not going backwards. So which is just amazing. So very exciting times, especially just to mark Ontario again. To do the parallel between Quebec and Ontario, I think Ontario will be the next Quebec, if we can say, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of supporting alternative fuel. They're extremely aggressive on it, and it's going to be very interesting for us and for you, the public, and everyone to see how they're going to grow in the next few years, and how Quebec will also grow in the meantime, because they have two different strategies.
Yeah, I don't want to elaborate then too much, because I think the three colleagues already mentioned the main aspects, and probably the baby in the bag will be maybe one of the first ones driving autonomously. I always see it from a perspective, how important is it actually to have that? There's no one is forcing us. You need to be autonomous tomorrow. Why? I mean, I still can go to work. I can still do what I need to do. It's nothing essential. It's not death or life or death, and I think some people out there are using it more as a marketing tool and a gag, and saying, "Oh, look how far we are at the forefront of technology." And you can't, with a technology like this, you can't be irresponsible. There are human beings sitting in a car, and I want to see the one who goes up and a pass on the Alps and in an autonomous car right now and reads a book. I mean, daredevil, I can only say. So, let's take it step for step, and I think, we're making right decisions. We have driver assist systems that help us, but at the end of the day, for me at least, and I'm old-fashioned, the one who sits behind the wheel is responsible. You know this old story about the microwave and the cat or the dog. I mean, sorry. at one point or another, we have to use our brains. We can't give that up and just assume that the technology takes care of everything. That's not the way I think how it should work. Take it step by step, make it safer, and also, and sorry about Canada, educate the drivers better about how to drive and how to overtake, really, just on the left side.
I'm like Wolfgang in that I've always intended I could be driving my car, but I'm I think a little bit more sanguine in terms of the pathway towards autonomous than my colleagues, and I hope AJAC members will be too, because I think that this is perhaps the biggest technology shift that we've seen since we shifted away from horses. And I think Canada is going to have a unique place in this development and change. Earlier this year, we announced that we're hiring 1,000 engineers, software engineers in Canada, and Canada will be the center for General Motors' software development for autonomous systems. Why? Because we have incredibly smart people. We have more PhDs at the U of T in artificial intelligence than any university in the world. We have incredible capabilities from, I've spent 4 years at BlackBerry. Autonomous cars are going to be critically in the middle of technologies like cybersecurity protection, mobile technology. We have that capability here in Canada as strong as anywhere, and we don't have to develop everything in Silicon Valley or in Israel. We can build actually the next big technology center here in Canada around a lot of this technology. At least we've chosen to do that. And so we have 30 autonomous vehicles being tested on the road now in the United States. I hope in the future we'll see that in Canada too. We've got the ability to do that in Ontario. But it is absolutely a customer-centered voyage that we're going to be taking. And I go back to, I think your question, you chastised me, Mark, for not answering the question. And the question was, how are we going to keep eyes on the road and attention? When I came back to General Motors 2 years ago, my wife got into my car, and we have a sort of a kinetic warning on the sides of our seats that rumble when you do exit the lane. And I asked my wife, "How do you like the car?" And she said, "Oh, I love the car. It's like going to the spa." And it's on all the time. I said, "No, you're supposed to stay in the lines." But so we do need to think about a variety of technologies, including iris scans and a number of other things, to make sure that, especially in this transitionary period where we're doing testing of autonomous vehicles, you'll see videos out there of people doing it with their hands just underneath the wheels. So right now the laws are that you have to be in control of the vehicle, you have to be able to take over the vehicle, but the car can drive itself, and we're developing this technology really quickly. One reason to do it, we lose 35,000 lives a year because of driver error on the roads in North America. And I believe that regulators have seen that this is something that they're going to insist upon. And I think my prediction would be in 5 years we're going to be looking back at vehicles that are 10 years or older, and we're going to say they're unsafe, because they don't have the ability to prevent crashes and save lives that the cars that now are coming out do. And I think that'll be an interesting take on the regulatory debate as we go forward.
So thank you for actually answering the question, David, because nobody else really did, which has got me worried, because it sounds like autonomy, complete autonomy in 5, 10, 15, 50 years, whatever it's going to be, is great. But right now, we're at a point where we're semi-autonomous, and you can't underestimate stupid. You got some guy in a Tesla allegedly getting into the thing and watching a Harry Potter movie because he figures his car can deal with things, and dies because of it. You've got people who know that they don't have to bother looking behind them when they're backing up because they'll have a sensor going off to tell them if that's the case. And you have people crawling along in traffic who are texting because they know that their car will automatically stop itself just in case. Or at least they like to think it will. How do you guys deal with that right now in the here and now? It's, for what it's worth, I believe Hyundai is the only manufacturer still that gets you to press the annoying little thing on the screen to agree to the legality of this. Do you still do that? It's really annoying.
Both of us do.
Okay.
Both of us have that annoying piece on the screen where you have to push to
Does
say
it
you
actually
confirm.
mean anything?
We have annoying legal departments too.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, when because it's evolving so rapidly. The technologies come so fast, Mark. It's something that we have to adopt to. You know, when we look at setting our framework for the vehicles of the future, and when I say future, I mean for us, our model year 18 product, we're looking at what is the base content in each car. What does our entry-level vehicle need to have? And the focus is on the safety elements, because people now are expecting that. And I think as David talked about, it is something that is going to be part of the future. I think we all can agree that it's going to be part of the future. I'm still concerned on two things with connectivity, and I'm concerned about some of the autonomous, because I think there's still obligation. I don't know that having autonomous vehicles, that there won't be any accidents ever again. I don't know that. We're not in a world right now where we can really test for that, and there's going to be a test case for it. I have that feeling. And then whose fault is it? I think that's what's going to prevent this from getting wider traction faster than I think a lot of people would like to see it get faster, is because of that one outstanding question. With regard to connectivity, and we've all talked about it, at what point do people want to keep their privacy? That is the biggest issue that we have in discussions internally about connectivity. Yes, it's fantastic that a consumer can hook up their car to the smartphone, and we're working on significant telematics advancements for next year that will come in our reel. And we're getting questions now about, how much information will you be able to track? Will you always be able to know where I am and what I'm doing? Well, from a safety standpoint, if you're in an accident, you're going to want us to know, right? Particularly if you're on an isolated road somewhere, you're going to want us to be able to help you. And I give credit to General Motors. OnStar has set the foundation for that. They've done a wonderful job with that technology, and that's what's driven a lot of what we're looking at from a connected car standpoint. But at the same time, what if I don't want you to know? If I opt out of telematics, you still have the ability to track me, though. And is that right or wrong? And I think that is the big question coming out from interest groups who do want the privacy. They do want to be able to operate with some autonomy. And, how should we dictate or should we not dictate whether they do or don't?
I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
Good points. Thank you. And we're going to move on to the third and final subject, because otherwise I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask you questions and it's not just me. But we're talking about ride sharing. And this is something that everybody is interested in. Before it was journalists, then it was the public buying cars, and now everybody's interested in this for the new future. In this new world of car sharing, ride sharing, Uber, and even the last mile, what do you think is the inevitable future of Canadian personal transportation in the next decade? And David, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, as I said, this to me is, especially coming back from the ICT industry and back to General Motors, is perhaps the most exciting and fundamental shift. My daughter thinks you get a car from your smartphone, and that's really the way a lot of people will think in urban centers in particular. So we've created a company within General Motors called Maven. And we have sort of three forms of car sharing that we're building our business around for the future. So one is to deliver vehicles to fleet drivers in a company we bought into called Lyft, which is sort of the number 2 company behind Uber in the United States. Because the biggest challenge that Lyft has is getting drivers. And they have people that want to work part-time, want to become drivers, but they don't have vehicles, so we provide ability for them. Interesting Canadian angle on that. We developed here in Canada a technology called low-energy Bluetooth. And what that does is it gives us the ability to email you your keys. So we have one of these drivers, we email them the key, they can open the car to the door car and start the car with an encrypted key that is emailed to them. And so an example of how those technologies are starting to change. The second kind of way that we use it is with condo owners. So just like in New York City, we have an example with a group called Stonehenge. When you get your condo membership, just like you would get a membership in a gym club, you can get an app on your phone and you can order up one of our electric cars, which is in the car park, or if you want to go away to the Hamptons on the weekend, you can get an SUV. So you actually, in the city, don't need to own a car. You can basically get a car, and in New York City, you can put up your hand and get a car anytime. Thirdly, we are developing a capability where we have our cars, and this is no different than a lot of other services, parked around at different convenient locations. You call Maven on your smartphone, you get the key and the location, you get in the car, you drive, and you can dump it in Burlington or leave it in Kitchener-Waterloo, or you can put it in another place and you make use of the car. So we are now in the business of selling kilometers driven and gigabytes rather than just selling cars.
Thank you. Wolfgang, as the president of a premium car company, do you have a different take on this?
And that's where I wanted to start. I mean, obviously, our customers, they want to drive their cars, they want to own them. There is the likelihood of sharing your super sports car is maybe a little bit lower than with other cars.
Like zero.
Maybe your wife or your best friend, yes. But however, it's still interesting. It's a difficult business case. So far, I haven't seen anyone where it really pencils. I mean, everybody's in the game and everybody wants to push that topic forward, but at the end of the day, you also have to make money with it. I will see it, or I see it in urban centers. People don't own a car anymore. You don't even have a parking spot in your condo anymore, maybe in the future. And it will play a role there as well. And again, it will be a gradual shift. Today, 80% of commuters are taking a car. That won't go away. Yes, you have Uber. However, that's for me just a taxi company that you call, and they can't get drivers, so they are pushing, of course, autonomous driving very much to solve that issue, and that will be probably also more part of our day-to-day life. But there will always
they're
be
pushing autonomy because they can't get drivers.
Of course. Yeah.
People don't want to drive Uber anymore.
You just don't have enough people.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate then the problem, who can fulfill the transportation need of the individual. But I also strongly believe there will always be the fun of driving, because so far we haven't talked about fun. I mean, I hope you had some fun in driving all these cars. Man, the last time I checked it, when I got my driver license, I was excited. So I hope that doesn't go away and that people still want to drive and want to be in control. And if I want to leave now, I can leave now, and I don't have to wait, because 500 other people are calling a taxi or something like that, and I can go wherever I want to go. And I can enjoy the drive. I can feel the technology. I can feel the road and be out there, just have fun. And I think that part, the individuality, will always be around as well.
Is this why you left Audi then? Because they were driving autonomously up Pikes Peak and around racetracks?
Wrong.
Francois?
Yes. I think it's interesting maybe to draw a parallel between autonomous driving and Uber. There's legislation issues and legal issues around autonomous driving, who's responsible, and how either city or the country will deal with this. Well, Uber is the same. You see all the things that happen in Montreal, for example, with Uber and the taxi drivers. Same thing in Toronto as well. So it's really interesting to see the evolution of that, and how once again everybody has and every city has their own way of dealing with this. But it's not going away. It's only going to evaluate a little bit like autonomous driving. But at Nissan and Renault specifically, we do have some projects on that, but not specifically in Canada. So I can't really comment on projects that are in development right now on ride sharing.
Fair enough. Don, do you have something specific to Canada?
To Canada? No, that's to the world. I just think I'm just not a big. I'm not a big optimist when it comes to the future of car sharing, and I base it on a simple fact. I have two daughters, one in university, one just graduated, and the one in university, I mean the Lyft and the Uber and a Maven solution right there with her phone makes a lot of sense. But the other daughter just graduated and she's getting married, and the first thing she did is called me and said, "We need to get a car." When it's funny how things change when you kind of move out of that environment. And I just think we're going in a different direction. I think car sharing's more the commoditization of our transportation systems as opposed to the personalization. And I think Wolfgang kind of hit it on the nose. I mean, I still think when I think of my phone and how personalized this is now versus where I was 10 years ago, I mean, I use this for everything, and I think my car is going to be an extension of this, and it's going to reflect really who I am and what I am and when I want to go and when I want to drive just to get the heck out of the house and away from my kids, and when I want to take them to hockey games and to dance recitals, and I want to go when I want to go, and that's a privilege that I've earned, I think, over life, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. So the whole ride-sharing thing, I think, like electric cars, there's a place for it. And I think in an urban environment with all the congestion and gridlock, absolutely makes sense. Do I think it's going to reflect the majority of people in the world that want to get out and have a car, their personalized car available to them when they want to go? No. I think we're still, and we have moved into almost where driving is an inalienable right, and we want to do it our way. And I think that's going to continue. I think the personalization of cars and wanting to have the ownership of a car is still going to be a very important aspect of our lifestyle.
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit different approach on it, because I'm like the gentleman up here. I love to drive my car. I like to get out, and I enjoy a summer ride, and I drive down to Florida every year at Christmas, and I enjoy driving a car. But if you look at what's happening in society today, the average life expectancy has risen to 77. There are more people staying in rural areas. Their need for mobility continues to increase, and right now infrastructure for mobility is not where it should be from a transport standpoint. And by that I mean either your TTC or GO Transit. While they're expanding, they're not expanding as rapidly as we would like to see. So those people still need to get point A to point B, and they're going to do it through sources like Uber and other car sharing methods. I think down in the urban centers and the metro markets, the one thing that we're seeing, and I look at the data all the time, and Polk is a great way to look and see what's happening to gauge what the future looks like. If you look at downtown specific in Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, and you look at the number of sales in those metro market dealerships, they've been relatively steadily declining for almost all OEMs. And that's because we're seeing, people, we see the growth in Toronto, we see the condos, we see the apartments going up. And those people, they still need to get around, but it's Uber. I mean, it is how can I get out and about and do the things I need to do without having the cost of a vehicle, because vehicles do cost money, whether it's a monthly payment or or you pay up front. There's a rudimentary cost to owning a vehicle, and then there's maintenance. And these people can find better ways to basically rent a vehicle and get themselves out of town or do rideshare. And I think depending on where you grow up, depending on what you're used to from your parents, and as we talk about millennials and what they're doing, millennials aren't buying cars right now. They're doing it's technology. It is all about, I can use the app on my phone and I can get a car in a matter of minutes. And if they, as they get married and they have children, that's the way that they travel. That's what's going to happen. The other side of it is the cost of the metro markets continues to rise, and buying homes nowadays is very expensive. A lot of people are migrating out of the city, and there's a need to purchase vehicles to be able to commute. So we're seeing growth in dealerships outside the city, but the metro market specifically, when I look at not just Kia, but all OEMs, there's challenges for those dealerships that are downtown. And I don't think anybody up here would disagree with that. I think that's just a fact that we have to be ready to deal with in the future.
Thank you. It's 10 to 3. Which means that the key station's open in about 10 minutes and we can all have fun driving again. But in the meantime...
Or I'll take them driving if they'd like.
In the meantime, I'd like to ask if there are any questions from the floor. I have questions, but I'd encourage you. Steve.
This is probably for all of you, but I'm interested in those of you who think that autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles are not a coming wave anytime soon. I think maybe some of you might be misjudging the momentum that seems to be building behind autonomous vehicles. And the other element of this is whether you think, you talked about connected vehicles as being one-to-one, where the people that I've talked to about this technology talk about it from the point of view of interconnected vehicles. That is, each vehicle knows what the other vehicle is doing on the road to facilitate things like convoying and maximum utilization of arterials and that sort of thing. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on the momentum of this, because we're already seeing testing of commercial autonomous vehicles on the road. I've talked to people about intercity freight trucking being one of the things that will happen sooner rather than later. So I'd be interested in your thought on that, and secondarily, because it is related to that, is all of this communication and intercommunication requires bandwidth, and there are different solutions out there for that. One of them being using satellite-based broadband to give you more bandwidth. We see Toyota doing some work on that area with a company out my way on the West Coast, and I'd be interested in your just general thoughts about how quickly. Do some of you really think this is not going to happen in the next 5 years?
That's going to fill the next 10 minutes if everybody gets to answer. But I would ask you just to address that if you can, or if a couple. David, did you want to say something?
Sure. I mean, this is something I'm talking with government about as part of my daily job. And I mean, in Canada, we're spending billions and billions on infrastructure over the next years. That was the big thing out of the last election. And so the question we're asking is whether or not the investments that we're thinking in terms of road infrastructure, whether we're comprehending the kinds of things you're looking at. We already have V2V, we call it, in terms of spectrum reservation, so that we can have certain special spectrum set aside for vehicles talking to vehicles. And this is part of the evolution of connected cars coming forward. But you're right, I was just at Carleton University last month with a professor who is developing sort of some repeater types of technology for roadside so that you can up the bandwidth. Because one of the things that happens in a very connected car that is autonomous is you're processing enormous amounts of data. You're going to be processing data from LiDAR, radar, from all kinds of inputs that are coming in. It's incredibly complex, and so the computing is extraordinary, especially at high speeds. So if you're processing at a low speed, that's one thing. You're going to need a lot of booting up in terms of your processing capability. And so we're even looking at some of those things as we go forward. So is it happening? Well, oh yeah, it's happening.
Are we ahead of it here in North America, or is Europe ahead of us? Europe has the HERE system, right? We don't have that. Surely they're ahead of us.
Wolfgang?
Any Europeans here?
No. Look, yeah, will it happen? Yes. I'm a little bit more on the conservative side. Doesn't mean that I'm right or not, no. But I'm a little bit skeptical. I'd like to see it fully developed and safe to use, because God forbid, if I make a mistake as a human being, I think that's accepted, so to speak, because we all make mistakes. If the machine makes a mistake, oh God, what do you do then? And the last time I checked, when was the last time your laptop crashed? How long have we had phones? How often do I have to reboot my phone because it doesn't work? How often do we really believe there will be no problems, no glitches? All I'm saying is that we shouldn't follow it in terms of that's the solution to end all traffic accidents that are happening out there. The last time I checked, the average car in Canada is 9 or 10 years old. So just by pure math, it will take then at least, if I start today, 10 years till the last one is out. And then what happens to all the beautiful old timers? A nice Stingray. I still want to drive that car, and everyone else around me is intelligent, and I'm not. Or I don't know. Swarm intelligence will be a big one. I think the car-to-car communication will be very important, but it should, I believe, always assist at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Ted, you want to say something?
Yeah, just something very quickly, and I think David really touched on it, but I'll expand on it in a way that I think everybody might be able to understand. We talk about the technology, the bandwidth, the infrastructure for autonomous vehicles. Think about yourself driving and going through a tunnel. What happens to your satellite radio? Right? It's over, right? You can't hear anything. So if we're talking about connectivity, until we have the ability to maintain connection through all different types of terrain and all different types of types of driving that we're going to experience, that's what's really going to prevent us from getting to fully autonomous in the near future, because I think there's a lot that still has to take place before we can make sure that this is going to operate in a safe manner.
Oh, very good. I'm going to ask for one more question. And then there's lots of opportunity if you wish to speak to individuals or together, or we can.
There was a lady who wanted to ask a question, please.
And she's a director now of AJAC, I believe. You have to respect it. Stephanie, did you have a question? This is for okay.
Your argument in favor of establishing a fuel cell network here in Ontario is that there's excess energy on the grid that's not being used, that's being sent elsewhere. Can you make your case for why it's a better use of resources to build a hydrogen network as opposed to just provide incentive to consumers to pull that energy directly off the grid to charge electric vehicles?
Because the grid can't store energy. The grid, it's not like everybody's going to charge their vehicles at different times to maximize utilization of the grid. But hydrogen can be stored. And so it's that storage capability, number one. And then number two, also the convenience of being able to charge in 5 minutes. So I think there's two sides of the equation. One, I mean, we're blessed in this country to be able to produce 80% of our electricity without a carbon footprint. The problem is it's expensive, and here in Ontario, we spend over $600 million a year in electricity that we can't use. And so every one of us that are living here in Ontario are paying that bill. And yes, we do dump it or sell it to neighboring provinces or down to the states, but we sell it for a third of that price. And so you can take that $400 million and use that to invest in hydrogen storage capabilities, and now it's available to you when you need it, whether it's piped to your home or whether it's at a Shell station. It doesn't really matter. It's just that the storage capabilities, I think, are incredible, and the fact that we can produce it here with this excess electricity when it is available as opposed to selling it on the cheap, I think just makes good sense for us. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. It is now 3 o'clock. I'd like to keep this going, but I'm sure that other people want to enjoy the wonderful weather outside in the cars. We're going to take a nice picture of all the various executives here, but then feel free to stick around and ask questions if you'd like to do so. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope to see you next year.